What is expected to be potentially the final year of the Utah Jazz tanking? What is going to happen? Will we finally see which players are part of the building blocks of the future? As well, will Hardy finally have a player emerge as a blue chip prospect alongside Lauri Markkanen? Will Lauri Markkanen remain on this team past the deadline? And will they be bad enough to get a top three pick, to be able to get a guy like Darren Peterson and a guy like maybe potentially in Mr. Cam Boozer or a AJ Dibansa, who would technically be considered a local guy? Now, Utah technically handed the keys off to Danny Ainge's son, Austin Ainge, but Danny's still running the show. And I think they were smart to take a swing on Ace Bailey. This is a guy who's going to bring in potential. So I think with Ace Bailey, I would say Lauri Markkanen. Obviously, we know the news on Walker Kessler, but just this team, if we look at it on a whole, Ace Bailey, Isaiah Collier actually had a really strong end to the year. And it'll be interesting now with Walter Clayton. Those two guys are kind of more interesting point guard prospects than when they were trying to force Keontae George to be their point guard. I think he can be a sixth man. Bryce Sensabaugh is actually a better shooter than people think. Cody Williams showed some growths at Summer League. Kyle Filipowski is going to be somebody who's going to be remembered as a steal, even though we all know what happened during the draft week and night. Jusuf Nurkić and Kevin Love are an interesting reserves with Kyle Anderson, aka Slow-Mo, and Taylor Hendricks coming off a gruesome injury, with Georges Niang and Svi Mykhailiuk being the floor spacers. There's some intriguing pieces to this roster. So I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section. What are your expectations, predictions, and who do you think is going to be a breakout player on the Jazz? Now, like and subscribe for more content like this, and go check out my work at hoopshype.com. Now, Utah is leaning into the youth movement. They're going to try to be bad, and not just to be able to develop their players, but because they want to be in the sweepstakes for either Cam Boozer, AJ Dibansa, or Mr. Darren Peterson, who might be one of the best draft prospects since, in my opinion, Victor Wembanyama. And before Victor Wembanyama, I don't know who you would put before that. But either way, Lauri Markkanen and Ace Bailey hypothetically give you like two guys who could be considered blue chip prospects. I think Collier, Filipowski, Cody Williams, Hendricks, or Bryce Sensabaugh. They have a platoon of recent picks. And new president of basketball operations, Austin Ainge, is making it clear that they want to develop now and take the flexibility into next offseason, because they don't control their draft pick in the following draft, and the following draft is a weak draft class. So it makes sense that this is the last year of tanking. Now, Kevin Love, Kyle Anderson, Jusuf Nurkić, Georges Niang, Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton, John Tonje were all brought in. Oscar Schwebe was also brought in. And I think being able to move off of Colin Sexton, John Collins was great. They turned RJ Lewis into a draft pick and Georges Niang, which is cool. Jordan Clarkson got bought out. Johnny Juzang and Jaden Springer left. And they're hoping that, obviously, Cody Williams had a really rough rookie year, that it can't get any worse. And this hopefully doesn't turn into a Johnny Davis situation, if you guys remember, with the Wizards. And Taylor Hendricks had that fibula ankle injury that they're hoping he can maybe come back and be the defensive two-way guy that they hope. And it's clear Utah this past year fully embraced the tank. They're going to do the same thing here. They've cleared veteran usage. They brought a few more veterans this year to be the adults in the rooms, but they've been stockpiling prospects and picks. Obviously, the result, the number 5 pick, was not what they wanted, but they got themselves Ace Bailey, who could be the third best player in this draft. And it's going to be a rough year for Utah Jazz fans, as they're going to be a bottom tier offense and defense, even though Will Hardy is one of the better coaches in the league. Now, I do believe bringing in Niang, Anderson, and Love, if they don't buy them out or send them somewhere before the deadline, or however much time they end up being on this roster, the size, the shooting, the feel, and the basketball IQ that they bring will help stabilize the kids. Ace Bailey is the best bet of a building block. I think Walter Clayton is something in between a Fred VanVleet and a Patty Mills guy, who those high character winners who are good shooters and have some grit. He's bigger than you think. This is going to be hopefully one of the worst, if not the worst team in the league. But they believe that they have the pieces to turn this around, similar to how the Houston Rockets did, stacking hits on draft picks, either that are stars or just really good role players, until one summer they get the opportunity to make a move while hopefully one of their young guys breaks out. And I think that's the model that they're trying to mimic. Now, Isaiah Collier, Ace Bailey, Lauri Markkanen, Georges Niang, and Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler. Oh my God, Walker Kessler. Did I just have a stroke? Walker Kessler, who reportedly is not going to be signing an extension, is probably going to be someone who gets ended up traded as he's going to be in a restricted free agent, or they don't want to sign him an extension because they're like, we'll just match whatever you get offered in restricted free agency because we just don't want to be the ones who give you that price tag. We'll let someone give you that price tag so you can't be mad for what you end up signing for. Walter Clayton, Keyonte George, and yeah, I think Walter Clayton, Keyonte George make up the backup point guards to Isaiah Collier. Then their wings are Svi Mykhailiuk, Cody Williams, and yeah, I would say that's like their pure wings. Then their forwards, Kyle Anderson and Taylor Hendricks. Then their bigs in Jusuf Nurkić and Kevin Love round out there. I think the most obvious training camp battle for a position rotation spot is going to be between Isaiah Collier, the second-year guy, kind of a Baron Davis type downhill player who was averaging like 18 points and almost 10 assists a night while shooting like above or around 30% or a little bit above 30% from three if I'm going off my memory. Keyonte George kind of regressed, and it's because he's not a point guard. He's a combo guard with some point guard-like skills. It's just not working out there, and I think personally, like not like working out I think he can still be decent, and he was a guy who last year averaged 17 points a game. I just think, and he also, by the way, shot 34% from three. Yeah, he shot 45% from the field, but I think he's going to see some like a downtick in his minutes. And then obviously Walter Clayton Jr. coming off a national championship, older. I think he's somebody who's going to be able to be a glue guy in the second unit and maybe even push some first unit minutes. I think Keyonte George will slowly be turned into a six-man, which is fine. I think Collier's downhill burst with Walter Clayton being kind of the change of pace three-point shooting guard will work out well, while Keyonte George moves into more of a shooting guard role. And Ace Bailey is someone that I think is going to be a starter at the three with on-ball reps, and I think he'll get some minutes at the four next to another forward. I think he's going to be around somebody who's going to be a point guard like Walter Clayton or Isaiah Collier, because he needs, or even a Keyonte George, just to be around someone who can help him if the shot creation stalls. I think the power forward minutes between Georges Niang, Taylor Hendricks, Slow-Mo, and Kyle Filipowski will be interesting. Niang's the best shooter on paper, but Filipowski is a skilled big who is probably the most talented out of everyone. Hendricks, in theory, if he's healthy, his length and switching ability will be huge, and Anderson's just a Swiss Army knife of a player. The backup center minutes between Kessler, Nurkić, and Love will be interesting, with Kessler maybe being slowly phased out or maybe traded or just balling out like crazy, but his rim protection is one of the better in the league. Nurkić is kind of like this bruising, playmaking five who will just take up space. I think Kevin Love will open up the floor with lineups whenever Lauri sits. I think their best skill and floor spacing lineup in terms of fourth quarter looks you could see is a Lauri, Kevin Love, or a Lauri, Kyle Anderson, Ace Bailey, Walter Clayton, Isaiah Collier lineup. I think maybe if they wanted to go with a more defensive size look, I think Keyonte George to give you some shot creation, Ace Bailey, Kyle Anderson, Taylor Hendricks, and Kessler, or you put Bailey, Kyle Anderson, Hendricks, Lauri Markkanen, and Kessler. No true point guard, but that would be Kyle Anderson's job. And then I think their best lineup in terms of balance would be probably Isaiah Collier or Walter Clayton, Ace Bailey, Cody Williams, Lauri Markkanen, and Walker Kessler. This is obviously still balancing the developmental aspect of this. One thing that I think this roster has done a really good job is having a lot of length and athleticism across their wings and forward spots. I think there's a lot of front court shooting with Niang and Love next to Lauri. There's a lot of young guys who are going to be getting a bunch of minutes as rotation players who have upside, and they have a bunch of ammo in terms of trade exceptions, expiring contracts, and extra second round picks. But we all will agree that the inexperience at the guard position without a real true point guard building block is going to affect their turnovers and pace control for the offense that Will Hardy will want to install. And we really don't know how good they'll be at shooting. Yeah, Lauri Markkanen and Svi Mykhailiuk are guys who are good shooters, but Bailey, Cody Williams, Hendricks are guys who are going to have to scale up their game. And physicality wise, like outside of Kessler and Lauri, is this team physical enough? This is going to be a bad offense as the reps are going to go to the youth. But I think Will Hardy is going to have a simplified offense for the guards, some drag screens, empty corner, pick and rolls for Collier and Bailey, some Spain pick and roll actions to free Lauri Markkanen, and then defensively they'll drop coverage with Kessler, maybe show peel with Nurkić, and switch with Hendricks, Anderson lineups. But patience and putting in some good habits is greater than winning games in their eyes. They're a team that's going to have to get to the salary cap floor, and if they spend that, they'll probably take on maybe a trade or two. They do have that John Collins trade exception of almost $18.3 million and PJ Tucker of 3.5, so it could be useful to eat salary if they need to. Now, we mentioned it before, Walker Kessler signed no rookie extension. Restricted free agency is the path this following 2026 summer, and Lauri is the franchise decision point. Extend or maybe explore value at the deadline if the timeline seem to mismatch. We talked about Ace Bailey. He's a explosive combo forward who might have all-star level upside, length, and shot creation and shooting ability at 6'8" with a 7-foot wingspan is legit, and he's shown flashes. He's probably going to be a starter, and have a long leash. It'll be rough at times, but it'll be interesting. I think the Walter Clayton Jr., who's a competitive combo guard with point guard like skills, who's probably going to play some point guard, is an on-ball, tough shooting, decision-making, high IQ, connective guard who is one of those guys who comes in as a older rookie but is going to be able to play and make an impact and have a long career. John Tonje, the 53rd overall picks on a two-way out of Wisconsin. He's a physical swingman who can play the 2 and the 3. He's got some straight line drive ability. He can hit corner threes and above the break threes at a decent clip and provide some defense. I think the breakout candidate, it's either going to be Taylor Hendricks or Mr. Walker Kessler, as he's going to probably want to earn his money and show that he's one of the best defenders in the league and maybe be a decoy guy. Cody Williams is a second-year player, so he's expected to improve, but any improvement's going to be huge. While Taylor Hendricks, coming off that injury, he's a switchable 4 who could be a small ball 5 and can moonlight at the 3. If he can seize closing minutes, like closing fourth quarter lineup reps, it's all going to hinge on if his three-point shot from the corner and above the break hit. But I think a lot of people are going to be watching Ace Bailey. Is he a legit building block? Can he create for himself? How's that shooting? What's his shot selection looking like? His live dribble passing will also determine if he can be a secondary playmaker. But I think watch his free throw rate, look at the turnover numbers, and how willing of a catch and shooter he is will dictate how good of a player he'll be. Now, I think Will Hardy's a good coach for him for that reasons. And I know you guys are probably wondering if you made it to the end of the video, how far can Utah go? It's going to be another developmental year. If Bailey flashes star ability and Isaiah Collier, Walter Clayton, and Keontae George stabilize the guard rotation, Utah is going to be a dark horse playoff team in 2026. If not, the war chest of picks and trade exceptions and contracts the Jazz have will allow them to maybe draft Cam Boozer or Devonta or Darren Peterson while being able to be opportunistic and try to trade for a disgruntled star to pair with their young guy. And yeah, so I think things you're going to have to look is what's going to happen with Lauri Markkanen. Will they shop him? Will Ace Bailey be able to be a primary on-ball player, or will he need to have a table setter like a Collier or Keontae George or a Walter Clayton? And obviously Kessler Edwards, my apology, Walker Kessler is somebody who we're going to have to see. Will he be played off the floor? Because we saw that his matchup minutes were dependent on those matchups, or his minutes were dependent on certain matchups, especially being played off the floor against spacing bigs, even though he's a great defensive anchor. They're also going to be a team to watch if they deploy the 18.3 trade exception to buy low on a young veteran or get a draft capital for taking on a contract. I think Bailey and Kessler would have to be really good for them to win more than 16 games. Dude, they're going to win barely 10 games. I think there's going to be a lot of pain, and Lauri's going to miss mysterious time. Most likely, they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league, bottom three-wise. Heavy rep year for young guys. Eyes on a loaded 2026 draft. So if you made it to this part of the video, thanks for watching. Comment, like, and subscribe. It'll help out the channel a ton. Comment in the comment section, obviously. What are your predictions, expectations, and anything I might have missed and thoughts? I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Ciao.